Sound, what is up? Okay, cool. So this tutorial is on frequency modulation with ofxMaxim. What is frequency modulation? Well, modulation is just a laminate word for change, and we're really just changing the frequency. Yeah, that's all frequency modulation is. It's quite an in-depth subject, and you can make some really advanced sounds with it. And I'm just going to do a basic example, but feel free to extend this in any way. Get creative with the ways you extend it. There's a really cool line function in Maxim. I'd encourage you to try that out. But you know, you can do frequency modulation with waves, with envelopes. Lots of things, lots of things. Buffers of sound samples, whatever you want to experiment with. I encourage you to give it a go and see what it sounds like. With this tutorial, I'm also going to use another library called DAT-GUI. If you just Google ofx DAT DAT-GUI. And we're going to use that for sliders to control some parameters, because there's quite a lot. Okay, so on with it. I've already included my header files up here. So now I need to include my audio out. That's got my output buffer. It has int buffer size and int number of channels. With the DAT-GUI library, we also need to add a listener. Or maybe I'll do that right at the end. So I'll build the thing first, and then we'll add the parameters to be able to change it around and see what we can make out of it after. Okay, so we need to have a buffer size, sample rate. We need to have a double of current sample, frequency, something called Modulation Index. We'll look at that in a little bit. We need to have modulation modulation frequency. Cool. Have our double array of outputs. Okay. We need to make a couple of oscillators. So one was our main output oscillator. We need a modulator oscillator and a phaser oscillator. In fact, we won't use the phaser one. I think we can do enough without. Now, there's some good examples in the Maximilian repository, Git repository. I urge you to check them out. They're not designed for openFrameworks. They're designed with just straight C++ in mind, but using my sort of templates, you can easily get them working in openFrameworks. It's called our mixer mix, and we need an envelope. Cool. So if we go to the main, let's do our initializing first. So sample rate equals 44/100. Buffer size equals 512. Background is black. Set up the sound stream. I think you can hear my flatmate playing bass, maybe. And a guitar as well. Probably better than noises we'll be making. Continuing on. Sample rates, buffer size, and 4. Cool. So let's set our ADSR, our envelope, which is also ADSR. ADSR just stands for attack, decay, sustain, and release. Cool. Great, let's add our audio input method, or output method, sorry. Let's just get a bit anal over that. Cool. So I'm going to loop through the buffer. And our mixer, when we make our current sample, will take make a stereo output. Cool, and then we route the outputs to the output in the buffer. Lovely. Okay, so we need to be able to trigger our envelope, so we'll use a similar thing as last time. Ooh, I'm just going to sit down. Okay, so we need to, when key pressed, we need our envelope trigger, when we set it, to equal 1. and we'll need our, when we release our key, equals 0. Cool. Cool. So let's sort out our current sample. So we're looping through the buffer, and we've got our current sample in our current iteration of the buffer, through the buffer. So we need to make an oscillator, and we need to modulate its frequency. Now we know that the oscillator object, whatever waveform we choose, it will take one argument, and that will be frequency. So we need to change that value. And the way we can do that is that we can have a baseline frequency, a center frequency, say the 440 that we set up here. And then we can add another wave to that, and we can scale it up by the modulation index. So the modulation index, well, tell you what, I'll type it out, but the modulation index really is just a scalar. It's just making the effects more noticeable. So let's do oscillator square, yeah, square. So frequency. In fact, no, let's have a sine wave. So frequency, and then we're going to add to the frequency. Remember, when we add, say, a sine wave to the frequency, it's not going to necessarily be always in the positive, because the sine wave oscillates between 1 and -1. So when we scale up using the modulation index, the modulating oscillator, it's going to become quite a big number and then quite a small number. That's a rate of its own frequency, the modulation frequency. So I will write it out. So let's. In fact, have I got another oscillator? Yes. What's it called? So it's called mod. So frequency add mod dot sine wave, and that's the modulation frequency, and that's all times by the modulation index. So that's cool. I mean, that's super basic frequency modulation, but I think we can do better, because really we're just going to have a constant tone here, and we can differentiate it by adjusting or changing the modulator with an envelope. You know, we can bring it. So if we were to add an envelope here, so okay, so we've got an input going into the envelope, which is our modulator sine wave, and then we have the trigger, which is then amplified by the modulation index. Then when we press space, we're going to it's going to go from the frequency of the sine wave adding 0, and it's going to, as the envelope increases, as the attack increases, we're going to get more of an effect until it gets to the peak of sustain, and then we release the key, and it will become 0 again after the release has finished. So that looks about right to me. So let's give it a whirl. I just realised I completely forgot to put the sliders in. No! So why don't we do that? Then we can sort of change and play with the sound with sliders. So to include sliders, I need to announce them first, and we can do that by doing OF. So we need to make a slider object of type ofxGUI. We'll make it a pointer to that type of the object. So this is just a baseline GUI, and then we that GUI points to that, and that will be a slider. Need to make some more for the modulation index and the frequency. And we also need to make a function to listen for the slider change for the slider event, and we can do that by writing void on slider event. ofx. And we pass in a slider object as a copy, as an argument. Actually, no, we don't. Pass in an event. So nearly done. So we just need to define this function and actually also initialize all the sliders. So let's initialize the sliders first. So GUI equals new ofx dat GUI panel. So ofx, and it comes with these handy anchors that we can use to put it in the center or the top right, top left. So our slider frequency needs to be a new, actually no, it's part of the panel. So I'm going to make GUI point to slider method. This takes a string as the title, so this is what we'll see on the slider. It takes a minimum number, a maximum number, and an initial value as well. Let's do that for the others as well. So what else do we have? We had modulation frequency, or mod freak. And that can be, this needs to be a low number really. And the modulation index as well. And this needs to be this is just an arbitrary number really. find what works for you. Okay, cool. Now we're not quite done. We need to bind these to this event listener. So if we change this, it knows to run this function and pass its value into here to do something, which we'll then define in here. So we need to go freak to on slider event, and then this and the address of app. Cool. Just rinse and repeat. Okay, cool. And finally, all we need to do is set up the listener. So we're passing in this event here, and we can just use this handy little if statement and use this variable called e.target, which is a member field. Yeah, we can just quite simply just write if e.target equals frequency or freak, which is, you'll notice, the same name. So then do something else. Else if e.target equals mod freak. Now the website for that GUI, there is a website. Check their GitHub and you'll find the link there. It explains it. Well, I've hardly explained it, but it explains the API a lot better than I could. I wouldn't claim to be the best C++ programmer anyway, but yes, if you're in doubt, then just get on there and they'll have all the information you need to know. It's very thoroughly documented, which is rare in my experience with openFrameworks. So mod index. Cool. So what happens if the target is frequency? Well, then we need to set the frequency variable to the value of e.target. Oh, sorry, not the e.target, but the thing e.target is pointing to, the value. So we do frequency equals e.target. Let's cast that as a double, actually. Frequency equals double e.target, and then run the wrapper to get the value. And what modulation index was a double as well. Okay, cool. Cool, and it's as simple as that. He says. So let's give it a go. Okay, so silly mistake there. I absolutely meant that as well. Alright, sweet. Okay, so it did work in the end. Let's wait for it to get going and then we can explore it. Cool. So no sound, right? There should be some sound.
No!
Aha! Can you see what the problem is? I can. You suck. You f***ing suck. Excuse me. So that should be that, and that should be that. Okay, I think it should work now. Cool. Okay, so just our basic tone, that's exactly what we were expecting. Now, I can change the basic tone like that. Cool. I'm doing all this and nothing's happening. And this is for the reason I was explaining earlier. At the moment, our ADSR hasn't been triggered. It equals 0. The whole thing equals 0. So no matter how much we change this, it's going to equal 0. Now, however, if I press the key, it's going to trigger the envelope, and we're going to notice a change in timbre. So here goes nothing. Pretty rad. That's pretty cool. Now you can see this is a scalar. So now, again, I'm still holding down space. I haven't let go of it. No. Cool. Well, there you go. FM synthesis at its most basic. There's loads more you can do. Trust me. Have a look into the line object. I think that's under Maxi Envelope, not ENV. Maxi Envelope. Have a play with that. Try other waves. See what complex structures you can build up. I mean, some of the really gnarly FM synths and really cool sounds are just really complex sort of sine wave structures. Sorry, just wave structures. But yeah, give it a Google. Have a play. Thanks for watching.